Welcome to the bright side of aging. Our motto is that age is a matter of the mind. If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. It has also been said there is no such thing as old age. There is instead chronologically blessed. My name is Ike Engelbaum. I'm a pharmacist. I'm the publisher of the American Senior Gazette newspaper. And our motto is that you cannot help getting older, but you can help getting old. Why I do these programs is so that I can connect with seniors in their lives as they age and in a positive way. We discuss housing, financial issues, legal issues, and also the religious aspects. Today, we're going to take a path of spirituality. And our topic is spirituality and aging. My guest for this segment is Dr. John Woodard, who is a professor of psychology at Wayne State University. He received his doctorate in clinical psychology from Wayne State University and completed a clinical internship at the Department of Veterans Affairs Medical Center in Ann Arbor, and a postdoctoral fellowship in neuropsychology at Henry Ford Hospital. His research has been funded by grants from a number of agencies, including the National Institute of Health and the Department of Defense. Dr. Woodard is a fellow of the National Academy of Neuropsychology, and he serves as a consulting editor for 4 scientific journals. His research interests include practical detection of Alzheimer's disease, the study of extreme longevity, risk factors for late life anxiety, and most recently, spiritual and aging. Welcome, Dr. John Woodard.
Thank you very much.
And that's Woodard without a W like Woodward, is that right?
That's right, that's correct.
Wow. Now, when I hear spirituality, I'm always confusing the two about religion. So could we start off with, if you were put on the spot, which you are right now,
okay.
how would you define religion? How would you define spirituality?
Well, religion really focuses more on the specific aspects of religious behavior, such as attendance at worship services, participation in other aspects of worship, such as the choir, serving along with priests, for example. So it really focuses more on the religious behavior aspect. It really deals more with a shared system of worship among a group of people and a shared doctrine that the members of the group are endorse. And from that sense, it's very much more of a corporate type of definition. It applies to more of a group of people as opposed to the individual. Spirituality, on the other hand, I think is a little bit different because it is much more individually defined and really reflects the extent to which people feel connected to a higher power, to God, for example, and also how much they feel at peace, inner peace or inner harmony. So in that sense, again, it's much more individually determined, and so deals more with, again, feeling that sense of inner peace and calm.
So in spirituality, is it safe to say that you don't necessarily need the belief in God as such, or at least, and from the various religions, there's not all religions believe in God. There's obviously other religions. So in spirituality, it's more self-contained in a way, or is that too oversimplification?
I think it's really dealing more with the sense of a higher power. And it could be nature, it could be some omniscient being, not necessarily God, but it's again defined in very much of a personal way for many people.
You know, this is way out in left field, and it just came to me. I love swimming.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the joys I have in swimming, of course, is that you don't sweat, okay? So,
mm-hmm.
but especially when I'm doing the backstroke, and I'm looking straight up, and especially during a nice summer day, you're looking straight up in the sky. There's something magnificent that happens about relaxing and connecting with nature. And I understand that books have actually been written about the positive effects that you have in water, because it somehow connects us to, depending on how you believe, how we came to be where we are. Would you say that that's the type of feeling that someone might have with spirituality, that there's a connection there?
Yeah, I think it definitely deals with a connection to that, that something, which we call the transcendent, and understanding that there's more to life than we can really see or understand fully.
Now, of all the various specialties you could have taught, what prompted you to pick up on spirituality?
Well, several years ago, in 2010, the pastor of my church came to me and asked me to give a talk to our congregation on spirituality and aging. And although much of my research deals with issues related to aging, I never had formally undertaken the study of spirituality and aging. So when I went to the research literature and started to look into what had been done, I found that there had only been about 150 articles that had ever been published on the topic of spirituality and aging. And of those, only a small fraction, about 130, were actual research studies. Moreover, within the last 5 years, almost 100 of those 130 articles had been published. So that tells me that this area is a rapidly growing field, and I think it's really receiving a lot more research attention. And I think it's important to start to focus in on these factors of spirituality and aging, and trying to understand what are some of the beneficial mechanisms that it can provide as we enter the second half of life.
Now, what about the first half of life? Is spirituality a factor there, or is it usually something that after people have been around for a while and they feel that, hey, there's something missing? Is that when spirituality pops in later in life versus at the initial part?
It definitely seems so. There was a large study that was done several years ago that looked at, so they surveyed older adults, people 65 and older, and compared them to people who were in the 50 to 64-year-old age range. And they found that a substantially larger proportion of people in the 65 and older group attended religious services more frequently, felt that religion was much more important to them, and also they prayed more frequently during the day compared to this younger cohort.
Not to make light of it, but I guess in your younger years when you're working and trying to make a living and making sure all your bills are paid, you may not have as much time. Is
Right.
that a factor too?
It certainly can be, but that said, there are a number of younger individuals that have been religious their whole lives, and some research studies have found that those individuals have they're better suited or better, they're actually more creative in late life than people who start attending religious services relatively late in life.
Well, one thing that I really do think that religion plays a tremendous benefit for people as they age is the fact that if you do get more involved in whatever denomination you're in, that there's a place to go to, and it's a structured time whenever you decide to go to services. I know in my circle there are people that their day is dependent on starting the day off at services, and then they have breakfast with whoever else showed up. It's sort of like a health club without exercise.
Exactly, exactly.
And speaking of exercise, I guess it could be argued that you can get a certain amount of exercise, but during the prayers you have to bend down, you have to stand up.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Maybe we could start a new venture. Exercise while you're praying.
Right. And those factors have actually been proposed as ways that spirituality and aging can go well together. The prayer conveys sort of a meditative aspect. There are periods of silence which allow self-reflection and are more calming. The movement, the up and down and kneeling and so forth, has a little bit of exercise component and flexibility. And listening to sermons or singing in the choir can also be mentally stimulating, all of which can play a major role in our mental health and improving our mental health and our cognitive health into late life.
You know, in thinking about it, I think almost all religions have either hymns or songs or tunes or what have you. So is there a connection there of music and spirituality? I mean, you get some of the same benefits from, from hearing some symphonies. I mean, there's some symphonies that you don't know why, but if it's really something that touches your heart, you almost get tears in your eyes.
Oh, exactly, exactly.
Isn't that interesting?
Yeah,
I find that fast. Is that the spiritual type of spin-off, do you think?
I think so. I think so. I think that's anything that allows us to connect more fully with that transcendent.
You may have to indulge me for a minute, but it pops in my head. I publish a newspaper, the American Senior Gazette, and I purposely have one page devoted to poems. And there's a 4-line poem on music that I think is very appropriate. And it says, music speaks what cannot be expressed, soothes the mind and gives it rest, heals the heart and makes it whole, flows from heaven to the soul. And I'm just wondering about spirituality. Is that part of the message that you bring across to your students?
Oh, yeah, I think so. I definitely think so.
Now, you teach in the psychology world.
Yes.
By the way, do psychiatrists also participate in your classes, or is only psychologists?
Occasionally psychologists, or psychiatrists. I do some work over in the medical school at Wayne State as well. So.
Well, that's quite a specialty. My goodness, you're actually bringing a whole component in of the psychology, science, and spirituality. There's a lot more to talk about, and you're going to be giving seminars, and you welcome speaking engagements. And when we get back from our break, I'd like for us to have you pretend that we're your audience. What do you bring across on those seminars? Okay. We'll be right back. Don't go away.
Enjoy farm fresh produce, kettle corn, baked goods, and more at the Lake Orion Farmers Market, held every Wednesday from 2 to 7 p.m. through September 11th. Each week, more than a dozen vendors offer locally grown goods, with more variety each week as new crops are harvested. The Farmers Market is located next to the Orion Arts Center and near Children's Park in downtown Lake Orion. Support the local economy and put fresh produce on your table. Visit the Lake Orion Farmers Market. For more information, go to downtownlakeorion.org.
And welcome back, and I'm talking with Dr. John Woodard, who is a professor at Wayne State University in the Department of Psychology. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And before the break, I was going to have you give us a mini overview of the seminars that you conduct. What do people listen to when you get up there and you talk about spirituality and aging?
Sure. Most of what I talk about is reviewing some of the research findings and trying to put them into context, into what's important to know and what's important to take away. We'll talk a little bit about the relationship between spirituality and longevity, and we find that people who are spiritual often have much longer and healthier lives compared to people who are less spiritual and attend religious services less frequently. We'll also talk about some more specific aspects of health, looking at the relationship between spirituality and mental health and how it relates to depression and anxiety and things like that in late life. And also looking at how spirituality can influence our cognitive abilities and keep our minds sharper and healthier as we get older. So that's sort of a broad overview. I'll talk a little bit about some of the research that I've done with exceptionally long-lived people, particularly centenarians or 100-year-olds.
Mm-hmm. Now, I would think that someone who's going into psychology as a career would be, I guess, over-educated in the sense of the scientific aspects. Here comes Dr. John Woodard, and he's talking about spirituality. And I mean, the limited amount I know about what might go on in the training of a psychologist, isn't that sort of difficult for a psychologist? Well, wait a minute, I know that if you've had a bad family relationship or what have you, you try to unravel what problems there are and what have you.
Mm-hmm.
How does spirituality tie in with a psychologist treatment program?
Sure. I think a lot of people are under the impression that science and religion don't mix very well. And so for me, it's been kind of gratifying to try to bring those two areas together and try to apply some of the scientific study to aspects of religious behavior, because after all, psychologists study behavior, and religious behavior is certainly a component of behavior. To that extent, I find that very, very interesting and very intellectually stimulating. And I think more and more we're trying to find evidence of factors that help us to cope more effectively with stress as we age. As we get older, we're faced with a lot of major transitional changes in life. Transitioning to retirement, for example, may be an easy path or a difficult path. Losing social supports, dealing with chronic illnesses and so forth. So I think finding ways to be able to cope with those types of stresses more effectively is very important and an aspect of what a psychologist would do. Our focus on spirituality and religion is a little bit different, and I think because there's such a large proportion of older adults who are very religious and very spiritual, I think that finding a religious path into stress reduction might be very beneficial.
Now, this may be way out in left field, but that's where my mind is, unfortunately. With religion, you have a Bible or some sort of a prayer book to go by. Is there an equivalent in spirituality? How does someone practice spirituality? You just hope it gets there? Do you have any particular format for people to become, hey, you know, that sounds interesting. How do I go about doing it?
Well, I think it's important to stress that people don't need to necessarily subscribe to one of the mainstream types of religions and to gain some benefit from spirituality. People who define themselves as spiritual do engage in regular practices of some sort that deal with veneration or adoration of various objects and meditation. And even some of the more Eastern religious practices are conceptualized in this field as being more spiritual.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, you brought out before that almost all religious prayers and what have you have a portion where it's done in silence. Mm-hmm. And I guess maybe that's the area that spirituality can pick up in our daily lives, and that is that, hey, just like in meditation, they tell you, take, you know, if you kind of devote a full hour, great, but even 20 minutes or a half hour, just to think and contemplate. There are all kinds of little exercises of breathing in heavily through the nose and passing out. That with spirituality, in a way, you pick that up in the various religious type services, which I find very fascinating.
Yeah.
I realize it may have been a while since you were asked by your pastor to deliver your speech on spirituality and religion. Do you recall, how did you present that talk? What did you say?
I basically covered a lot of the same topics that I cover in some of my lectures now on spirituality and aging, and I prefaced it by noting that what I said before about the relationship between science and religion, and sometimes they don't seem to cross paths, but I tried to introduce the topic by using this as a way to try to merge the two.
Mm-hmm. So if you were put on the spot in regards to defining a difference between spirituality, is there such a thing? I mean, is there something that one does cover that the other one does not?
A difference between spirituality and religion?
Right, right.
Well, I think the critical difference is how it applies to the individual, and the religiousness or religiosity is more of a group type of activity and a more systematized type of activity, whereas the spirituality is much more individual in nature.
Now, we talked before we got on the air about how some people change from one religion to another. Do you have any insight as to why would someone start with a certain denomination and switch to another one?
Sure, there can be lots of reasons that could account for that. Sometimes some religions change their doctrine and their belief system, and that's not palatable to the individual, and they can't get behind that doctrine any longer. And so they may seek another religion that does share some of those beliefs that they have. Other people, I find, are drawn to or away from religion based on significant life events, and dealing with various tragedies or difficult life experiences can either push people out of a religion and make them less religious, perhaps, but other times it provides that framework for stress reduction and coping with significant life events that can be very helpful to them.
Right, right. Well, when you analyze it, tragedies many times can be a determining factor as to how you continue after the tragedy and trying to rationalize why me. And I guess with religion, that's one of the aspects that religion plays a significant role. At least you have somewhere to go and somewhere to pray or whatever, wherever you have that peace of mind. And I'm fascinated many times that people will walk into their house of worship when there's no formal service there, just to be in that atmosphere. So I guess there's stuff we don't understand about the brain, isn't there?
I think the critical thing here is the connectedness, and feeling connected with a higher power or feeling connected with other people. I think we as human beings are always striving to be connected to each other, and that's what religion and spirituality both provide, is that sense of connectedness.
You know, speaking of connectedness, I have a gut feeling that a lot of people will maybe, like we talked about, switch from one denomination to another because when they were growing up with their family, whoever was the leader of that particular house of worship had a certain message, and the message changes when they age, and it doesn't seem to be the same stuff that they had joined initially, and they miss that connectedness with the family. So, and not to take away from worshiping God and a higher being, is it possible that a lot of people switch because they're connected to that family and they know how much joy as a family they got together, and now it's not there because whoever is the leader is not getting their message across in the same way?
Right, absolutely. No, that's definitely the case. And we see that happen when there's a change in leadership in a particular religious organization, either at the local or the national level.
Right. Well, you know, it's interesting. I was on the board of our synagogue, and how some of the board members were frustrated that the rabbi was not delivering the same message that the prior rabbi had delivered. And they felt that some of the members had left because the message wasn't the same. And we came to the conclusion that if people are that short-sighted, that their belief system is dependent on one human being, then they couldn't have been that religious. Because when you analyze it, not to poo-poo leader of a particular house of worship, but it's like somebody who's the receptionist at an office. Just because you got a grumpy receptionist doesn't make the office necessarily a dysfunctional office.
Right.
So the person representing that religion is really a critical part to how strongly you believe in that.
Yeah, it certainly can be. But we find that on average, the general connectedness with the people in the church seems to play the biggest role in people's overall satisfaction and willingness to stay in a particular group.
Yes, I'll never forget in talking at one of the sessions that the presenter said, "What does a leader need?" And I piped up out of the clear blue, "Followers." Okay, you can't be a leader if there isn't anybody following you. And I would assume that that's the same part that's true in leadership as in spirituality. Is there such a thing as someone who's sort of the spearhead of spirituality, or there is no such thing as somebody who is the most spiritual thinker of all the spiritual type leaders? Do we have anything in this country like that?
I don't think from a spirituality point of view we do, but certainly from different religious denominations there can be some people who are viewed in that way.
I see. Well, for whatever it's worth, you get my vote should you wish to take on that position. And I just was wondering, have you had students that come into your class and they figure this is a course I have to take to get my degree, that started off really negative, and at the end of it say, hey, you know, there might be something to this? Have you had that occur to you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think that does happen from time to time, and it's a very gratifying feeling when they have that change.
That's what makes you a leader. You're getting followers. Unfortunately, we've run out of time, and I always like to leave my presentation with one of my favorite thoughts, which is, yesterday is history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift, and that's why we call it the present. Please enjoy your gift of presence and live life by looking at the bright side of aging.